I'll just kind of, I'll introduce you, and then I'm just going to disappear and let you get on with it. But I do think that what you're about to go through is going to be really interesting, really useful for everyone in this industry. There's been a lot of information that people have been talking about and sharing already. There's loads of stuff on the government websites, but it isn't always really clear and obvious on how to interpret what it all means. So I think it would be great to find out from you what's on offer. And I think just recently, actually, since we got this set up, they've now released another, the Bounceback loan, which is another one to add to it. So I'm sure that'll be a part of it. So I'm going to hand it over to you. This is talking about government grants, business support and funding during COVID-19. Over to you, Will.
Thanks a lot, Rupert. So for all those listening, my name is William Goodwin. I am an engineer by training and also a chartered accountant. I worked in the festival industry whilst at university, site crewing. I also have a penchant for toilets and sanitation. I did composting loos at music festivals events before kind of moving into the city and working as an accountant. I'm going to try and share my screen with you guys and move to presentation. So, as you've probably all heard, there's loads of grants and other things that are available. The government has kind of constantly tried to help and come up with new ideas, and there's a considerable lag between Rishi or someone else in the government announcing something and then actually the kind of the civil servants delivering it. There is a mixture of things. They've been looking at employees and self-employed companies. So hopefully I can do a kind of a whistle-stop tour of what's being said, what you can do. But kind of more importantly, if any of you guys have any questions, please fire them through. I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet so I can answer more questions at the end. If any of you have got anything kind of more personal that you'd like to talk about, I'll share all my personal details afterwards, and you can give me a ring, you can drop me an email. Basically, my day job is looking after a portfolio of 39 kind of small startup businesses. I manage a 100 million investment fund. And so I've kind of seen most of what certainly the businesses are going through and fully understand kind of what the self-employed are going through as well. I know how this industry works in terms of its feast and famine. There is a big kind of 4 or 5 month window in the summer where most people make a considerable portion of their income for the year. And obviously COVID has hit at just the wrong time. We've seen loads of big events cancelled, and kind of the main effect for most people is the cash flow side of things. So I'm going to quickly run through. There's various financial loans and cash schemes. There are various things in terms of tax, employment, both employed and employee, various things you can do if you've got property, and then other resources and links. And as well as this presentation, accounting firm I work really closely with called Allianz have also done a bit of a longer one with everything kind of how you go about calculating these things, and I'll share that as well afterwards. So most of you probably heard of the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. This was probably one of the first things that was announced by the government. It's a great scheme, but it's not really being delivered by the banks. We've got some amazing companies in our portfolio that have grown, and are growing sales, but because they're, growth businesses, they're investing in assets and stock. And so, they're break even at best. And the banks who we as taxpayers bailed out are now not really delivering these loans to the front line. Businesses with a turnover of less than 41 million, up to 5 million loan. I think that's pretty much everyone in the events industry, bar the big lights of Arena, who are obviously a listed entity and have big shareholders. 12-month interest free, and then interest afterwards. It's 80% backed by the government. There is 100% backed, which I'll talk about in a second, which was only announced earlier this week. The civils went live kind of a month ago, and banks are really struggling to get the money out the door. They're using their existing lending criteria. and it's really, we're finding it really hard. So although it's a great scheme in principle, it's not being affected. We are currently part of a lobby group with with one of our associations to try and get this changed, and we think that's why the Bounceback loan was kind of brought out to help smaller businesses. There is the Coronavirus Future Fund. If you're a business, this is a great way of raising capital. If you've got kind of a co-investor, so if you've got some angels or another investment fund, you can basically get matched funding for this. It's a really good way for smaller businesses to help kind of cash flow to the future. This is launching in May 2020. So in terms of how you go about applying for it, we're still waiting to hear back from HMRC on this. But I imagine it will be another scheme from the business bank, which will allow more of you to get anything. And then let's go to next. So as Rupert has mentioned, there is obviously the Bounceback loan. This was only announced this week, so again, launching kind of next week. So we're still going to work out the full ins and outs, but it's for small and medium-sized businesses, kind of borrowing up to £50,000. The government will basically guarantee 100% of loan of it, 100% of the loan value, and it'll be interest-free for 12 months. We do have a feeling that this will allow a lot of businesses to get access to short-term capital very quickly. I don't see why any bank would not want to give money that is guaranteed out for them to be able to turn around and go, oh yeah, we're doing our bit, we're helping small companies. So that will hopefully help a lot of you if you are a company or if you have a business. One thing I did see, I read a kind of a BBC News article this week about Forth power generation. They were talking to the BBC about how they'd struggled to get kind of a loan. One thing that I think would be really good for them is they talked about how they owned 90% of their assets and they only leased 10%. The Sybil's loan, you can use it on asset financing. So there are banks that will provide asset financing under the Sybil scheme. So for a bank to turn around and loan against an asset which provides security, whilst the government are also providing 80% security, it'll be a really good way for people to raise cash in the short term very quickly. So, if you have looked at getting a Sybil's with your bank under a normal loan and you do have assets that you can use as collateral, then maybe go back to them and see what they can do. But the Bounceback loan is up to £50,000. So, that should hopefully help a lot of the smaller events businesses get through the summer and kind of, get through to next year, fingers crossed.
Will, can I ask a quick question on that one?
Yeah, of course.
But just on the Bounceback loan, on the previous slide, there was a couple of things. One was I heard a rumor that some banks are saying there's a minimum 13-month term, which means you're going to have to pay at least 1 month's worth of interest. And I wonder if that's the way that they'll try and make this work for them.
Hopefully. Again, we're still the full terms and conditions, because it was only announced this week. We're still waiting on a full kind of a list of what you can and can't get on this. There's a lot of conjecture and a lot of the press are trying to interpret what the government is saying, and different people in government are leaking things. So until we actually see what the banks are going to do, there's only any way of it working. When Sybil's was announced, everyone was like, great. And then actually in practice, the banks weren't doing what they should have done. It's been a bit hard on that point.
That makes sense. And then I was what does undertaking in difficulty mean in your last point there on this slide?
Basically, we believe, again, this is our interpretation, so don't take it as gospel. Basically, if you, as at December, were trading, so if you weren't struggling, they'll look at your financial history. Now, for the events industry, this, our lowest cash point as events industry business tends to be January, February time, if not Christmas, because you're end of the season, you've paid your staff, deposits don't tend to come in until early in the year. But I think if you can prove that, your business position at December was in the normal trading, i.e. you were, the same position you have been for years, you might be slightly higher because you were, you're growing your business. I think that should be it. But I think it's basically anyone who, under the normal course of business in December, was trading as they normally expect to, and not worse. Again, it's a bit of an, I don't really like this clause because it gives banks wiggle room.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. I'll let you carry on.
Brilliant. So in terms of employment, the coronavirus job retention scheme, this is working really well. It is working as the government said, and it was done on time, which kind of begs belief why they can't do other things as they expect. But really simple. You log into your HMRC POE account, and you basically follow a very simple form online. You fill in the information that's required. The only difference is where, depending on the number of employees, you either manually enter it or you upload a spreadsheet. But again, it's all very straightforward, and it is being paid within 5 working days. I know pretty much every single one of the companies that I look after that has furloughed staff has been paid within 5 working days. Most of them got their claim in on the day it opened, and were paid by the Friday. So, it's a great thing. It does pay 80% of the wages, and it allows a lot of companies to kind of keep staff on. Certainly for the events industry, it'll be a really good thing because, when you're meant to be paying your staff over the summer and the events, it'll keep them employed. I think the aim behind this is basically to keep people paid so that they keep spending money, which will help the economy and hopefully prop it up. It is a grant, so it's not repayable. It'll allow you to carry on and not worry about having to repay this as some of the other loans are. Statutory sick pay. So a lot of people, this is just a slight variant on the coronavirus job retention scheme, because when coronavirus first came out, a lot of staff basically either became ill or were new people and therefore had to self-isolate, and therefore a lot of firms were paying people under statutory sick pay. This basically allows employers to switch out the statutory sick pay that they've already employed employees and pay them under the coronavirus job retention scheme. Again, you can follow this all through the HMRC website. It's very straightforward and easy to do, and it's just a case of calculating what you have paid staff for statutory sick pay, and then basically calculating what you should have paid them for the coronavirus job retention scheme, and you can pay them the difference and claim the difference back. Probably now far more important to most people on this webinar is the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme. It's basically a carbon copy of the job scheme for employees on payroll, and it's basically does 80% of your average trading profit, which is what you make in a year divided by 12, and it's capped at £2,500 a month. There's a lot of people that are self-employed that have slightly abused the system over the years in terms of declaring some income but not declaring others, and are now slightly regretting it because they're not being supported. I have full faith that everyone on this webinar is fully compliant and declares all their income. And if you're doing that, then you should be absolutely fine. They are basically taking the average income over the last 2 years that you've declared. And if you're newer to the industry, then you use what you've declared over 12 months. If you've been in it for longer, they'll take more years. So if you've had a few good years and then had a bad year, you're not going to be disadvantaged because they will look back at least 3 tax years. So it should get a good average. Your trading profits must be no more than £50,000. And then it's a case of claiming the grant. Again, you do this on the HMRC website using your unique taxpayer reference, which is your PAYE, your self-employed tax number. If you do your tax return yourself, you should be able to log into the HMRC website and apply for it there. If you have an accountant doing your tax returns each year, then get in touch with them and they should be able to help you claim that very quickly and easily. This is now due to go up and running in May. and will probably follow a similar process to that of the coronavirus scheme. You can claim, and it will be backdated to the 1st of March. So you should be able to get March, April and May's pay, so potentially up to £7,500 paid in May by the government, and then June as well. And then we will wait and see whether the government decide to roll this for July, August and September. It will all depend on what happens on the 7th of May and the releasing of restrictions, but we believe that it will be continued for at least another 3 months beyond the end of June. Property. So if you've got property, so if you've got business property, or you rent barns where you store your kit, fencing, lighting, whatever that may be, there are business rate reliefs. We have flatly told every single company across our group to cancel their direct debit for business rates. For the time being, the key thing is basically preserving cash. So you can argue with the council later as to whether or not you're owed it. Obviously they talked about for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses. I would say the events industry comes under leisure businesses, even if you're like a plant hire company. If you're a plant hire company that focuses on festivals and events, I would say you classify as a leisure business, and you can argue the toss at a later date. But most of them will basically be waiving business rates for the next 12 months. Certainly in England. I don't know about Wales and Scotland, mainly because we don't have any businesses there. They are also offering grants of up to £25,000. This is done by the councils themselves for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses. Again, you should be able to look at this if you have got a business. So if you're a power generation business that does the events industry, you should hopefully be able to get a grant for £20,000 or up to, as long as your property is the rateable value between 15,000 and 51, which, bearing in mind most of your businesses are based in the countryside and outside cities, would probably fall into. The other really good thing is there is a government ban on evictions. So commercial tenants who can't pay their rent because of coronavirus will be protected from eviction. The difference here is you will still be liable for rent payments due, but you can just defer them. So certainly, as I've just said, cash preservation so that you can pay your staff and weigh is the key thing at the moment, because most of you won't have cash coming in. So you want to stop the cash going out. Most of the landlords we've worked with have been really great. A lot of them have given a lot of our tenants a 3-month rent waiving period, because what they've realised is it's a lot easier to give tenants 3 months rent free than it is to lose a tenant because your rent forces them into insolvency, and then you have an empty property for however long. Certainly there's not going to be many people renting properties for the next couple of years. So speak to your landlords. Most of them are great. They may turn around and say, do you know what, have 3 months free. They may also offer to defer some of your rent and spread it over the remainder of your lease. Everyone's going through it at the moment, which is one of the few things that's kind of good about this. Everyone's feeling the pain. And so, you know, if you're nice and you're open and honest with people, they'll be nice and open and honest back with you. So that's good. But if you stop paying your rent, you can't be evicted. But always try and do things, you know, properly and honourably. It'll help. In terms of other resources, loads of kind of people out there are helping businesses operate in this weird and wonderful time. Zoom are obviously doing phenomenally well, but offering free resources. We're doing this whole presentation via Zoom. Seed Legals are allowing businesses to create free work from home policies. So if you're normally based in an office, so Rupert, for example, in his lovely shed, he could create a work from home policy for his staff, who are obviously all working remotely now. Google has allowed Hangouts for free. So if you've got G Suite as your office, likewise, I think Microsoft are doing the same if you use Office 365 with Teams. Cisco are doing free versions with WebEx. And there's lots of other kind of software out there that's hoping that by providing a free offering now, certainly for the next 12 months, that when this is all over, people will stay using their software and will convert to paid resources. there's a load of links here to all the different bits and pieces. Obviously, there was a load of support offered in the budget, and obviously this has been updated as well. Companies House and HMRC have been really good about payments on account. So I should have mentioned that when I was talking about self-employed. If you've got a payment on account coming up, you can defer this. Obviously, speak to HMRC. They're really actually quite friendly people. If you've got VAT payments or you've got tax payments, you can defer these. They are probably the first people you shouldn't be paying because of who they are. So it'll allow you to defer those cash payments out. And certainly my advice to everyone is look after your cash. Cash is king, and don't pay people that you don't have to. So that's really good. And I'm looking here, it's really good to see that Phil's got a Sybil's loan. Great. That's really good. And, I think Lloyds Bank is certainly one of the nicer banks. Barclays and NatWest have been really bad. So apologies if any of you bank with them. So has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask? I'm looking in the Q&A and there's nothing here. If any of you got any private questions, I will share my details in the comments section actually now, so that everyone can have them. My mobile number's there and my email address will be there shortly. Again, I'm happy to provide advice and chat to people.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thanks, Phil.
So Zachary, I've just seen your director's furlough. So yes, there is clarity on that. So directors of companies can furlough themselves. And the guidance is obviously you can't work, but directors have statutory obligations to companies. So work excludes your director statutory obligations. So preparing accounts for filing at Companies House, anything that a director would be required to do if they weren't an employee of the business is basically allowed under furlough.
And is there something where, as a director of a company, you quite often, I mean, the big thing, the problem at the moment is you get a lot of people that have minimum PAYE and they're taking divs, which is a fairly standard setup. What are the options for those groups?
In terms of the options for those groups, it's hard. I think because you would declare dividends on your, it would all depend on where you take most of your income. Most people do it as if you take dividends, your income, i.e. your PAYE and your dividends will be declared on your self-assessment tax return. So your best bet is to claim under the self-assessment rules and not under the PAYE rules, because most people will draw enough income that they pay national insurance to qualify for that. And then the rest they'll pay in dividends because it's more tax efficient. So you're probably going to be better off claiming through the self-employed scheme as opposed to through the kind of PAYE furlough scheme. Yeah,
okay, that makes sense. So a few questions that are coming in. Let's start with...
Phil, yes, I do think it'll be extended beyond June. I think the government is going to do it. I think we potentially will start easing the restrictions on the 7th of May. We've seen a lot of shops kind of social distancing, so B&Q have opened again and they've got the 2 meters. I think that'll happen. I don't think pubs and restaurants will open until 2021. We're planning on all of our restaurant chains. Certainly delivery will open up again, but actually going to a pub or restaurant, I don't think will happen now until at least one of ours is planning July 2021, which is a long way off. It's hard.
That's interesting. Thank you for that. So then there's some questions coming in the chat as well. We'll come to them on a second.
Yeah.
Sean saying, for the SE income support, what kind of proof of loss of income is needed? And it says, I have several events I know who are going to be cancelled, but it is not publicly official yet.
That's tough. I think the key thing is certainly to date. So March and April, we know what's gone ahead, and we know, I think the last big event was Cheltenham. I think a lot of them are holding out hope because their insurance policies will only pay, certainly events, their insurance policies will only pay out if the government forced them to cancel, similar to what you're probably seeing if you've ever got a flight in the last couple of weeks that's been cancelled. Hopefully, you've obviously got your average income over the last 12 months. And I think Julie's on the chat has also talked about this. You get 80% of your income in the summer. How do you explain to HMRC that your average over 12 months doesn't reflect the loss of income over the next 4 months? Yeah, I think it's a tough one. Your average monthly income will be the last 12 months, which includes that 80%. I think there'll be a case of take what you can now, and then we'll have to, it will all come out. I know the events industry are lobbying government about this, saying, look, we are a phenomenally cyclical business. It's going to be tough to say, well, I need this 80% income in the 4 to 5 months over the summer to support me through the winter. And I have a feeling that where that happens, there will be exceptions made, and you'll be able to get. It's not like an employed person who's paid the same for 12 months. You take what you can in the summer, and that tides you over the winter. There will certainly be conversations with the government. I think Stephen's just made a really good point. You've held back your 50% due on the 31st for your 18-19 tax return. It shouldn't affect your self-employed entitlement in June. And actually, if you have got 80% of your income, not paying your tax is probably a really good way of just saving cash. There will be a massive unwinding of this over the next 3 or 4 years. And I think if you can prove that, because the government shut the industry down, you shouldn't really be disadvantaged. You probably won't earn as much as you would expect to. And I think that's just sadly the way it is, but you should be able to get enough to keep you going. Mortgage companies are being phenomenally good. If you've got mortgage payments that need doing, they are deferring them, and they are allowing people, because again, they don't want a glut of properties as people kind of can't pay their mortgage and therefore get evicted. They'd rather give people 12 months grace and not become a property owner. It's hard because, as I said earlier, things are being announced by the government, and then how they work in practical terms is not necessarily always quick and easy. Ministers announce things, and then it's the civil servants that have got to deliver it. The scheme for employed people has worked really well. I have no reason to believe that the self-employed one won't work as easy. I think it'll be a little bit more complicated because obviously you've got to look at your average earnings over the last 12 months. Will the scheme go longer than 6 months, i.e. September? Probably. I think it'll, as I said, I don't think things will be back to normal until 2021. So that would hopefully allow most event industry people to kind of at least keep going for the next 9 months. But I can't predict what government are doing. We keep asking, and certainly from our point of view, lobbying. But yeah, time will tell. And I'm more than happy to keep kind of providing a monthly update via you, Rupert, so that people can kind of really try.
Yeah, that'd be great. On that last one, in fact, Adrian's question was, he thought freelancers had to wait to be contacted by HMRC and won't be told if they're eligible until June.
That's the main thing, but people we know that have spoken to HMRC have been really good. They understand that employed people obviously make up the majority of the workforce, and so they've rightly or wrongly focused on them. I think it was the quickest and easiest fix for them to try and keep the majority of the population. If you've got everything and you can contact HMRC, speak to your accountant, drop them a line. Obviously, they're not going to make any payments yet, and they won't do till the portal goes live. But if you're self-employed, you will qualify for it, whether you're a freelancer or not. There's people that there's IR35 issues, obviously, but we won't go into that. That you should be able to claim, and you should be able to go. And as soon as the scheme goes live and you can apply. Don't wait to be contacted.
I think Jules's comment on the 80% income in the summer, that is just the biggest challenge for our industry and similar industries, and it's going to be really difficult for a lot of people, and it's already proving that it's only going to get harder. So the only thing I'd say is one thing I'm doing is just speaking to as many people as I know in the industry and trying to work together to find ways that we can all jointly come up with interesting opportunities I don't want to overuse the word too much, but to pivot or to kind of utilize our skills and resources as together, as well as what we've got within our own businesses. But what can we do jointly to do something different? And it doesn't have to be in the events industry. And I just think that I know it's hard sometimes, because it is for me. Not remaining positive all the time is impossible, but to kind of keep thinking that there is an end to this, and what can we do in this time to make use of it, and how could we work, there's a bunch of really clever, intelligent people in this industry. What can we do as a group of people, as well as individuals? Anyway,
exactly. And whilst a lot of freelancers, do stuff in the summer, there are, lots of other jobs out there. If you need to go and earn money, you can earn money. The construction industry is going back to work and will do, under social distancing rules. If you've got HGV drivers, there are lots of HGV jobs out there for haulage firms. I know that Jameson's, the event haulage business, is doing, repurposed all their lorries and trucks and are cracking on. There are haulage companies out there that need trucks and drivers to fulfill orders. Certainly supermarkets, and I know that, being British, people are drinking a lot at home now. If we can't go to the pub, we'll bring the pub home. So, there are other jobs out there. There is work available. Obviously, it's not in what we love, which is the event industry, but we only have to look at the airline industry, where you see stories of pilots that are now stacking shelves in their local supermarket because they don't want to be sat at home, and they want to be out earning money. So if you want to work, you can, and there are roles out there. It's a weird time. I do think the world will change as a result of it, but festivals and events will come back, and people will want to go back to the pub. So it will get better.
So got another question from Ellie or Elle. So I think it's a similar one to what so if you have a part-time job on PAYE and are also a director of your own limited company, no other employees yet, would you have been eligible for any support? So she's lost all her freelance work and her part-time job isn't enough to survive on.
Again, it's one of those things, the government haven't looked at all the minutiae around how people are employed. So there are lots of people that do, part-time jobs and have their own company that they provide services through. It'll be a case of, sadly, I think they won't be able to cover every permutation of every role. I think it's a case of, do you earn more money through your part-time POE job or through your limited company? If it's the limited company, then you can furlough yourself and claim this through HMRC's payroll website. If your POE job is paying more, then you could look to up your hours or find another part-time job. Sadly, I don't think there's going to be a solution to this. So
we've got Sarah's asked, under the SE income support scheme, can we work freelance or PAYE without losing eligibility? God, I can't talk today.
So hopefully, again, we don't know the full terms and conditions, but if you haven't been working yet, you should be able to claim for the months that you haven't worked your average income. If you are working, there has been times where having your hours reduced puts you worse off than if you had been furloughed. So likewise, there will be a point where 80% of your monthly income may be more than you get from working part-time. You'll have to calculate that yourself. Do we know if it's going to change the eligibility? We're still waiting to hear, but I think as long as you haven't been working, you should be able to claim for that time that you weren't working.
Interesting. So we got Cliff. Can you read that? So I think this might be similar to what we talked about, but he just popped out. So I'm a single director owner and I furloughed myself. And there has been word in the Commons on Monday from Rushi that the door is open for suggestions on how to make it work in terms of paying dividends. I haven't heard that, but
no, neither have I. But as I said earlier, I said if you are paying yourself dividends, you will have to do a self-assessment tax return, which will include your payroll and your dividends. So it may just be easier to claim under the self-employed scheme because you probably have earned a bit more if you paid yourself dividends through that way. Thanks. He's going to post the link. Open suggestions. I think once he knows and has made a decision, they are quite a supportive government. I think they will do everything they can to help businesses. We've seen the biggest bit of, they are basically paying a third of the workforce's wages, which is unprecedented. I think they'll continue to be in that vein. And as the economy opens up again, hopefully they'll be able to release it. But sadly, it doesn't take away from the fact that, bad businesses will go bust. I was quite staggered when I read that the average business in this country has 3 to 5 weeks cash to operate. We do sadly live in a very kind of hand to mouth society, and it's going to affect people. And I think Rishi was quite honest at the beginning, saying, we won't be able to help every business and every family, but they'll do their best to try and help everyone they can. And it's nice to see that everyone's trying to rally around and help each other. It's kind of helped a little bit more inward. I do think long term it'll have a massive benefit. We'll try and move our reliance on overseas suppliers and actually start looking more inward at, looking after number one ourselves, which can only be beneficial for manufacturing, services and everything else in the long run.
I'm just going to jump in. I've got a question for you, William. Just looking at investment. So companies that were maybe in the process of looking at investment or, taking on investment to grow their business or to start a new company. I suppose it's in 2 points, really. What your view is of the broader landscape for investment across different sectors, and maybe a bit more detail on the events industry from that perspective as well.
It's interesting. So certainly investment is still happening. We have since the whole crisis kicked off and we moved into lockdown, one of our businesses has closed 5 million of fundraising from a German fund who wasn't actually looking at the business when this whole kicked off. So there are people out there still deploying money. A lot of the investment funds are just battening down the hatches a little bit, mainly because they don't make investments without actually physically meeting the company and the founders and kind of seeing the whites of your eyes. That to us is really important. So we've stopped all new investment until we can actually sit down with people, chat to them, find out about them, see how they react to things. Because, there are things, it's the founders and kind of the leaders of these businesses that certainly now in these times will drive them kicking and screaming through. From my point of view, certainly individual investors, which I imagine probably, those doing EIS investments, so kind of high net worth and angels are probably more prevalent in the events industry than kind of a fund, unless you're a tech business like yourself. But they'll be just keeping an eye on their cash a little bit more. We fundraise every year. We're a venture capital trust. We saw kind of fundraising. We had our best ever year, but in kind of the second week of March, it just fell off a cliff and it stopped. So we closed our fundraise early. We have got one new investment we'll make, but we'd already met them and started the process in January. So it's more kind of going through the legals, which we can do quite happily remotely. People are out there. They are making decisions on fundraising. So if you are, growing, obviously I imagine growth may be put on hold, but people are already planning for events. The game fair has been pushed back now till October, so they're still planning to go ahead. Glastonbury have moved to next year. They will still be doing a lot of the work, procurement, and kind of tweaking things over the next 12 months. It's an interesting one. I kind of didn't really touch on it, but I certainly talked to Rupert about it earlier last week. We're talking about the legal side around deposits that you've been paid as a supplier, or what the deposits mean if you're an event. And it's really interesting. It'll all come down to what the legal terms and contracts say. I know that a lot of events have been quite good and have said, look, we're doing it next year. If you want to keep your ticket, you can keep your ticket. If you want a refund, you want a refund. But it'll certainly be for those growing businesses where they've taken a deposit and they've already spent it to invest in kit for this summer, or they've spent it on deposits for their suppliers for their event. there's going to be a lot of kind of litigation and insurance and all that kind of around deposits. It's going to be tough. But in terms of the investment, I think a lot of investors will be just being a bit more guarded, a bit more reserved. So it will be harder to raise money, but there is still money out there to be raised.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. That's a good bit of insight.
Will, there's one more question. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I have, from Sean.
Yeah.
Again, I think if you can claim it for when you're out of work, but I think if you take up new work, I think that'll put a start date on when you can't claim. So just make sure if you are going to go out and be a delivery driver that I hate saying this because people don't like to be sat at home doing nothing, but if you are going to get paid more sat at home doing nothing, then look at your personal situation. If you are, if you do need the money to pay your mortgage and keep food on the table with your family, then you have to be slightly selfish and take whatever's going to pay you the most, whether that is going out and working or doing the income support scheme. I think if you, as I said, I'm pretty sure that if you've been off work March and April, you would get 2 months under the self-assessment scheme. And then if you went on to PAYE in May, you would then obviously move and be paid under PAYE.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Did they mention something about, unless you're picking fruit, in which case you can stay furloughed and pick fruit? That seems to be an option.
I think that's one of the big things. And actually, at the moment, we've all gone into lockdown and the sun's come out. I saw a very amusing photo of it, Britain in the summer, Britain in the winter, and they're both very wet, rainy pictures. It's Britain in lockdown. It's a lovely sunny one.
Yeah.
Another question, actually. So I've heard someone say that if you're furloughed, then you can actually still work when work comes up and just report the amount of work you've done, which will be deducted from your overall furlough thing. So is there a kind of mix and match thing that you can do with furloughed where you can work still, but you just need to be open and transparent about the work that you're doing, which would reduce your furlough payment?
Yeah, so I think if you, I can't remember the full ins and outs, but if you work for a company and that company furloughs you, you cannot do any work for that company. So I think what we're seeing, for example, BA or Virgin have furloughed all their pilots and cabin crew. You can't do any work for BA or Virgin. But I think if you were to go out and do work for another employer, i.e. you go and stack shelves in Tesco's or you go and pick fruit, and you're open and honest, the government will support you. I think because, you're filling jobs, you've moved into a key worker role. And I think if you do that, then they're going to be really, really grateful and, do whatever they can to help you to basically make sure, you get up to $2,500 if that's what you earn a month on average.
Right. Yeah.
Great. Well, look, I think we've run out of questions, which is just in time. So, Will, thank you so much. That was immensely useful, full of really, 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 really interesting and useful information. And it'd be great to stay in touch, maybe do another one of these, depending on how things are going in a week or two. And either we do a quick pre-record or we'll do another quick webinar on just what the updates are, if there's anything else that's come out from government or be brilliant. Thank you so much. Appreciate you spending your time.